Hello, everybody. How to Write Romantasy is available for pre-order right now, and you have the option to receive a free digital workbook that will help you craft a power couple, throuple, or polycule that readers will devour. All the details are in the description. Get on it. On to today's topic. Today we're speaking with author Angela Montoya all about the most popular fantasy creature out there, vampires. Angela Montoya lives in Northern California with her family. When she isn't with her partner, 2 children, goats, chickens, and dogs, you can find Angela co-hosting the podcast of the publishing Persuasion. Her debut novel, Sinner's Isle, has received starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly and trade reviews from Booklist and The Bulletin. Her sophomore novel, A Cruel Thirst, was chosen as a Junior Library Guild Gold Standard selection and Editor's Pick Best YA of December by Amazon Books. Her third book, Carnaval Fantastico, comes out February 3rd, 2026. Angela's book, A Cruel Thirst, takes a very popular trope, the vampire romance, and puts a completely unique spin on it, which is why Angela is the perfect person to tackle this topic today. Angela, it's so good to have you here.
It is amazing to be with you. Like, I'm just staring at you because you're such an icon. I have been watching you for eons at this point. So I am so thrilled. It's really, really fun, like full circle moment for me because you're where I started when I was starting to watch YouTube. So, and now here we are together.
That is so sweet. Thank you so much. I'm okay. I'm not emotional at all. It's fine. Thank you. That's so sweet. So let's start with the basics. People assume this is an easy question to answer, but the truth is stories about vampires have existed for thousands of years and span across so many different cultures. So how would you define vampires?
Oh man, yeah, that is not an easy question. Like the one thing they have to have is some sort of like blood sucking or life sucking, emotion sucking. There's got to be some sort of sucking involved. That I feel like has to be the criteria. Like they just have to take, and in order to survive, they need to take from another life form or person or creature. So for me, like that is the number one thing that all vamps sort of have to have across the board. Otherwise, it doesn't really feel vampy to me. If there's not that danger of like,
oh my gosh, he's gonna come and suck the life out of me.
Because we've seen in media, the fangs look different sometimes, the claws are different, but I feel like every vampire thing I've seen or read, we've got to have some life sucking involved.
I completely agree. I like that you mentioned it doesn't necessarily have to be blood because, for example, there's, I don't know if you watch the show What We Do in the Shadows,
yes.
But they have like the energy sucking vampires and the emotional sucking vampires. And I thought that was so creative and clever, especially because we call those people in real life like, oh, they're an emotional vampire. Yes. So I love that, and that there's different variations, but it all comes down to sucking. And there's a joke to be made there, but I'm going to be an adult.
It's hard. I know. Yes. It's hard. Yeah.
I'm going to try to be mature and walk away. So vampires are super popular in fiction, which means it can be easy to fall into cliches. How can writers write about vampires in an original way?
To me, this is kind of where the fun really starts when it comes to vampires, because we have seen them so many times in so many different really fun teen shows, right? That like all sorts. The difference comes from the writer. It comes from you. So for me, when I started to think about, okay, I want to write a vampire story, but I didn't want to just write, he's an ancient vampire falling in love for a young woman. Maybe there's a werewolf involved, like we've seen certain things before. And so I think for us as writers, what sets it apart is pulling from your own stories, from your own experiences, from your own cultures. And that alone will morph it into something new, something unique. Every new like vampire media I've seen, it always feels a little bit different. But again, it's because it's a different person writing it. So everything is a slightly changed and slightly new. But again, I think when I decided to write A Cruel Thirst, I knew I wasn't going to write like the standard Eastern European vampire. I knew I wanted to pull from my own culture, and that alone made it a different story and pulled from different lore. And it really became something really fun to explore and build and create. So yeah, I think again, just like finding what are you really interested, what are you really loving, where are you from in the world? Do you love 1920s? Like then go into that mode and start creating a world where vampires exist, and it'll become something totally new for readers and watchers and the like.
I completely agree. And that's something that I know Twilight is low-hanging fruit, but that's why, there was a period where people were like, oh, we've seen so many vampire books, we need a break. And now vampires are back in style. And that was because so many people were just sort of emulating Twilight. And it's like, it's great if you feel inspired by other people's books, but you don't have to replicate it, like pull from your own life and what you want to see in the story. It's not about seeing something that's popular and hitting copy paste.
Yes. Oh my gosh, totally. And I think that's exactly what happened was during the heyday of Twilight. Like we were just trying to find something that made us all feel that same way again. And so, yeah, it was like a rinse and repeat. And of course, readers will get tired of the same stuff unless you're a Regency romance reader, and then we're always about the dukes. You know what I mean? Like you can't get enough. But when it comes to vampires, like we're expecting something new every time we open up a book, because I think that's part of the fun of reading a vampire story is like, okay, what is this new, like what's going to set this apart? What's going to make it new? And that is like, I think what draws new readers in is like, okay, I want to see how she made this vampire.
Yeah. And vampires have been around for so long. It's so easy to make it original because there's so many different sources of inspiration you can pull from it. So when people were doing the sort of lather, rinse, repeat of vampires, it's like, come on, like you've got so many options. I mean, obviously there's lots of folklore where like fae, there's so many different variations of fae, but vampires I feel like is one of the oldest, and it's like you have the most options to choose from,
Like again, it's so fun. So like go for it. Find something else and tweak it.
On a similar note, a lot of people associate vampires with European folklore, but vampires are present in East Asian mythology, Mesopotamian mythology, and more. What are some different mythos or cultures writers can tap into when writing about vampires?
There's so many. Like you said, vampires have been around for thousands of years. I mean, there's so much folklore and mythos when it comes to vampires. You could literally pull from almost every culture across the globe and find something new. And that's what I did for A Cruel Thirst. Like I mentioned, I didn't want to pull from Eastern European sources because I knew where I wanted to base my story, loosely based off of like 1830s Alta California. So obviously California, but when we were still part of the Mexican Empire, giving Mask of Zorro vibes.
Yes.
Which we love. Yeah, right? It's so freaking fun. But I knew Alta California was kind of its own place. It was very secluded, from the majority of the world. Yes, there were Eastern European influences coming in from the ports and whatnot, but I wanted to build a new sort of vampire that would exist in this world separate from those sources. And so for me, I pulled from my own heritage. I pulled from Mexica or Aztec lore, and then I sort of formed a new vampire from this lore. I picked and pulled, and I researched like the pantheon of gods that the Mexica had, and created something new. And that was the best time I had while like working on this book, was this research into the vastness that is vampire lore, and then also just pulling from my own heritage. And it became a new sort of vampire, but was still familiar enough where we understood, okay, these are vampires. So I think when you're looking into writing a new sort of vampire, dig into your own roots. And again, like dig into what you find fascinating and exciting and different, and you will find something. There's so many really, really interesting, really terrifying, really cool, really nasty vampiric stories across the globe. So I really encourage just anybody, just dig into it. Like literally just search up vampires and you will find lots and lots of lore, and very different too than Eastern European vampires, but so cool and so freaking scary and awful, and something that would keep any child in the house at night, you know, which I think is what maybe a lot of these were created for, was to terrify young children. And it worked for me as a child.
Yes. I was so excited when I heard the concept of your book because I'm Puerto Rican. So anytime I see sort of like Latin influence in writing, I'm like, yes, in the world building, because no shade to European culture or anything like that, but especially in fantasy, we're getting a lot of the medieval stuff. And so it's like something different. Yay. Very exciting.
Yes. Like the last time I was at a conference, which is in California, I was at the LA Times Festival of Books. And obviously, locally to LA, we have a very beautiful, wonderful Latine population. And so when I said, yes, I wrote a story with Mexican vampires, people were thrilled, excited, because it's like, yes, we don't see that many. And it's so freaking fun to see it from all different cultures and heritages. I was honestly thrilled. And even it's interesting though, because like in the traditional space of publishing, which is very unfortunate, you feel like, or at least I felt like, when you are part of a diverse background, there can only be so many of you in one space.
Mm-hmm.
There could only be
I'm sorry.
She's feeling it. She's
like say it louder. Butters, are you upset? I don't know what's going on. She's like, we're talking about my culture.
Yes, she feels it.
She's like, what about werewolves?
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to it, I promise. But in the traditional space, it feels like there can only be so many of us in one space at a time, right? So recently, obviously, I came up with a vampire book. We have Isabel Cañas with Vampires del Norte, M.M. Olivas, which is Sundown in San Ojuela. So you feel like, okay, we can only have so many Mexican vampires, but that's not true, because there's so many variations. Even if you're pulling from the same source, every single author is going to pull something different, take something different, and turn it into an entirely different story. So that's just a plug to read diversely.
I agree.
Plug that right now.
I agree. And that's another thing, is a lot of people talk about like,
oh, well, this idea's been done before.
And it's like, everything's been done before. Like the Savior's Champion is about a fight to the death tournament. I can think of a million movies and books that have a fight to the death tournament. The Hunger Games, Gladiator, Battle Royale, you know? What makes it unique is your individual voice. It's the nuances. The idea itself, like the premise, your premise is never going to be unique. It's everything that you add, your voice, you know, the setting, the world building, the characterization, that's what makes it unique. And that's what makes it, you know, and it can completely set it apart from everyone else. So
yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And no one's going to write like you, where you have your humor and your writing skills. And shout out to that book, because you killed it with that book. That was so good. It was so
Thank
good.
you. Butters, are you okay now?
I knew she was a vampire girly.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Are there any common mistakes writers might want to avoid when it comes to writing vampires?
When readers are told that they're going to read a vampire story, that they're coming into it having a certain expectation of what a vampire is. So if you're writing a story and you say it's a vampire story, but instead you're giving them zombies, or what we expect a zombie should be, I think that isn't a good call, because your readers are going to be pissed, because they came in wanting a bloodsucker and they got, you know, like
a brain eater.
Yeah, they got a brain eater, and that's not as sexy as a bloodsucker. You know, like I'm coming in like waiting, and that doesn't happen. See, she agrees again.
She's like, that's right. Say it louder.
And of course, you can tweak the vampire isms. You know, they don't have to have all the things that we expect. They don't have to be only come out at night. They can be daywalkers. We've had that and we accept it, right? But we have like a reason why. So then we understand it. And we're like, okay, that's genius. That makes total sense. Yes, of course he can walk in the daylight. He's got a special ring, but still keep to the guidelines of what we expect for vampires.
Yeah, that's something I talk about a lot, just in general. Like, you can't promise your audience one thing and deliver something else. It's something I mention a lot for like writing romance, is people will be like, oh, I'm writing a romance. And they're like, but my romance is special because they die at the end. And it's like, yeah, and it's like, yeah, I understand that you're trying to be unique and unpredictable, but you're breaking the rules of the genre. And people read romance because they want it to be predictable. They want the happy ending. So people are just going to be pissed. So it's the same deal with vampires. If you promise a vampire book and you're like,
I'm being so unique.
you're not being original. You're just breaking your promise to the readers. That's not how you be original, by breaking the rules of the genre. That's not the way to do it.
No, it's not. You don't want to piss your readers off, because that's not a good look.
Right.
It's going to be a scary day for you if you ever look at your reviews, because they're not going to be happy about it.
Right. So do you have any staples or trusted tips for writing about vampires?
Doing your research is always a good idea. I think for many of us, like, it's pretty easy because we've all had access to so many great shows throughout the years. So binge on those shows, and you always kind of find something new and different that you really like and what you don't like about vampires, and read the classics as well. Like, I always feel like I want to dive deep before I take on any sort of genre or subject, because again, I don't want to come at it thinking I can switch things up and do things quirky and different, but that's not what readers are going to be expecting. What We Do in the Shadows is such a killer show, pun intended. It's such a good freaking show, and that to me was what I really wanted to pull, was a little bit of that humor and zaniness and quirkiness that they had. But then I'm also really influenced by like Blade and True Blood, just all across. There's just so much. There's so many good ones. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think anytime you're trying to dive into these big genres, right? Like, everybody knows vampires. So just do a little research and read some books and see, again, what's working and what's not working. And I think that'll help. I think that's just a good tip across the board, is just to keep researching and reading as much as you freaking can, which is hard. I know when you're an author and you're doing a million things, it's hard to read. So grab your audiobook and do it there. No excuses.
Of all topics to research, this is one of the easiest topics because it's been around forever. It's like, your research is entertainment, essentially. Just go watch a TV show. Like, it's not hard.
It's not hard.
Yeah.
Hello, like, we all know Edward Cullen. We've been there. We've seen him in action. He's quoted in my house daily.
So what about vampire romance? How can people write a vampire romance that captures readers and stands out from the crowd?
Coming back to A Cruel Thirst, when I first started coming up with the idea, the concept, my first initial idea was like, obviously he's got to be moody, broody, alpha male that's so hot, and he's just like has $1 million in his bank account, and he's just fluttering around the world doing everything. But my friend, I was telling her this idea, and she was like, but does he have to? Because I write young adult, can't he just be a boy, a young man that becomes a vampire? That switched everything for me. And that became the thing that set his vampire journey apart from many of the vampire stories that we see and that we love, and rightly so. And so it became less about him being this mega powerful, alpha, sexy dude, to a boy fumbling through his transition into becoming a vampire. And because he was fumbling, he became a lot more vulnerable. Then I built a female character that was sort of the opposite of him in many ways. And so that's where their romance sort of like slowly budded from, was this kind of like difference. And I think we see that also in many of the traditional vampire stories, where we have this strong character and then another character that is being introduced to vampires and is terrified. And so, we have this kind of like polar opposite thing where they're sort of battling out their different experiences. So I think it feels like when I think of all these different vampire stories, the beauty is, and the romance kind of comes from this character that is super strong, but is willing to become softer and kinder and see the world a little bit gentler, because they've been introduced to this softer human character that is vulnerable.
Shadow daddies.
And so it feels like that mix of him or her coming down and him or her coming up and joining together and falling for each other, I think is kind of where the beauty of vampire romance lies. It's always different because everybody has different preferences. Maybe they just want someone to just fling them around and bite them, and that's fine too. So, I think it just varies on what sort of vampire love story you want to write.
I love that you mentioned how your first thought was like alpha, moody, and broody, and then it's like, no, I don't necessarily have to do that, because I love a good moody, broody guy every once in a while, but right now in romantasy, that is the trend. And so for me, it's like, I would like something different every once in a while, so I love the idea of like a vulnerable vampire who's like figuring it out, like I love that. It's kind of like flipping the bad boy, good girl, and it's a good boy, bad girl situation. That's also what I wanted to do with the Savior's Champion. So yeah, I love that. That's just right up my alley.
Heck yes. Yeah. I think it's so fun to add a different sort of twist to it. And again, and that also just brings a new twist into the vampire canon. He's different. He's not like the other vampires,
I love that. That's so cute. So thanks again. Thank you so much for joining me. Do you have any projects in the works, and where can everyone find you?
Yeah, no, again, thank you for having me. This is an honor and the coolest thing ever. My third book comes out February 3rd of 2026, and it's called Carnival Fantastico. It's a young adult romantasy about a magical traveling carnival. I know, girl. I know.
She's like, I want to read it.
She wants in.
She wants in. She's like, but I can't read. I'm sorry.
Get the audiobook.
Right. Okay. We'll listen to it together.
Yeah. But yeah, that one's about a magical traveling carnival, and the magic may or may not be coming from somewhere not so nice and not so magical. And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at @AngelaMontoya_author. I'm living there, so you can find me anytime.
That's me on Instagram. It's just nonstop all the time. That's just where I'm always at. I'm there more than YouTube, and YouTube is my biggest platform. But
that's fine. So funny. Yeah, I love that. I love that for you.
Thank you. So that's all I got for you today. How to Write Romantasy comes out in October, so if you're trying to write your very own fantasy romance novel, pre-order it today. Even better, if you pre-order, you can receive a bonus digital workbook. All you have to do is submit your proof of purchase. I've got details in the description below. You can also check out my first writing craft book, Shut Up and Write the Book, or you can check out the first 2 books in my award-winning romantasy series, The Savior's Champion and The Savior's Sister. They're linked below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos on Wednesdays, and I host live streams on Mondays, and if you want to be alerted as soon as I upload, ring that bell. Bye! Have you subscribed to my channel yet? I mean, you totally should. I post new videos on Wednesdays. I also host live streams on Mondays, and they're super fun. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and be sure to ring that bell. That way you're alerted as soon as I post new content.